Today we're welcoming Reena Morgan as our speaker. She's an educator, leader, relationship builder, and child advocate. She has over 20 years of experience, and she helps fellow educators, parents, and caregivers, giving them just the support that they need to do a really difficult job, which we know that all educators have a challenging job, but a very rewarding one. She's here to present her conversation on cultivating community. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Reena so she can go ahead and take over from here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Camila. And thank you, Camille, for having me. And thank you to all of you for taking time to join me. I know how busy all of your schedules are. And I know that even sacrificing a lunch hour is a big ask. So thank you for making the time today. I, as Camila said, have been in the Montessori sector for 20 years, and the last 13 of those I was in the administrative team overseeing all of our 0 to 6 programs, and just recently has shifted into consulting. And so doing educational consulting and parent coaching. And something that I'm doing currently is that I'm in different schools, both public and private. So I'm not sure I've updated my website to reflect that just it's been such a joy to actually get into other schools and see both public and private. So not sure where if your school is public or private, but hopefully this does appeal to both of your or whatever audience is there, so that I am coming with that framework in mind. Something that I really, it's funny because as I was putting these slides together, I was like, I could do a whole thing on just leadership because I really think it's important to just know that I hear you, I see you. I know how hard your role is because there's a big, it's a big load to carry. And I can't say enough about strong leadership is about strong relationships, and how to cultivate that. So especially if you're a newer leader, that really so much of what your work entails is building and earning that trust to cultivate those relationships, because with those relationships is how you build community. And so again, something that I really truly believe in is the relationships are foundational for everything. And how you do that is checking in on your people, right? How are you? How is your family? What do you need today? Right. So those are what I would say are healthy deposits that you're making into your relationships just by getting to know your community, getting to know your parents, getting to know your faculty, and truly wanting to build those relationships, to get to know who they are beyond just seeing them as a faculty and just seeing them as a parent, seeing them as a person, seeing them as a mother, seeing them as a sister, a parent, or whatever their roles might be, getting to know those roles too. So that's a really important part of cultivating the relationships. I also put in here, just as leaders right now, that just to acknowledge there's different realities that your parents and your faculty are in, especially post-pandemic, and especially during this time of racial reckoning. I think we all can acknowledge that those are some big things happening in our society right now that we're all still trying to figure out. Do we go back to the way things were, or things will never be the way they were, right? And everyone's in a different headspace with that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide. But as a leader, acknowledge just holding space for that, and especially the racial reckoning that's happening right now in our society, right? That there's voices that need to be elevated, and there's also a lot of those who, we are in power. Leaderships hold a lot of power. And so how do we use that for good? How do we make sure that we're sharing some of that or inviting other people to the table? Absolutely. Okay. So if anyone, be vulnerable, whenever I hear the word vulnerable, I always think of Brene Brown. And if you're not familiar with Brene Brown, highly recommend her Dare to Lead podcast. It's a podcast for leaders. She's not giving me any kickbacks for promoting her, but I just personally love Brene Brown's podcast, Dare to Lead. I constantly am ordering different books based on different speakers that they have on there too. So I just love, because she talks about this all the time, about being vulnerable. And it's okay as leaders to say, I don't know everything, and that you seek input from others. So in, building your community, if you're not feeling certain or sure about, am I doing this the right way? Gather that feedback, right? Look for that advice, seek the people in your sort of network or team, and let go of that ego, right? You don't have to know everything. Good leaders actually admit that they don't know everything, and that they lean on others to help them grow and learn. So I think holding those few things are really important as we think about, again, how we support our communities. So as you know, the title of this workshop is Cultivating Community. And I wanted to just mention that getting those pulse checks. So everything I share today, what's something that's really important is to make sure that you're gathering feedback on, is this working? So checking in on the culture and climate through feedback surveys, through focus groups, through informal events. Are you actually achieving the goal, right? Does your community feel safe? Does your community feel heard? Do all voices matter? And so just as we go through this talk, I wanted to just preemptively put out there too, that you also have to do the work to make sure you're achieving this goal. And there's different ways we can talk about that more too, if you'd like, but I would definitely, with faculty and with families, right, to get that feedback is important. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind typing in the chat or unmuting, I'm fine with either one. When you hear the word community, what comes to mind for you? And Camila, if this is okay, where I can ask you to just read, hopefully, what might be coming in the chat, and or if anyone wants to unmute.
I see camaraderie, families, everyone working together, communication, unity, relationships, invested members, safety.
That's great. I put this picture of a honeycomb, partly because my company is called Hive. And so when I think of community, I think of how we all work together in partnership to create something so beautiful like a honeycomb, right? Like the bees all working together. I love what you guys have shared. And it's so funny because I tried to just like type up on the next slide what might come to mind. And you guys all said so many other great, wonderful, beautiful things. So Camila, if you can like save the chat for me later, I would love to like gather that for the next time and update my slides or add it to my slides.
Sure.
Thank you. But I for sure agree with everything that Camila shared that's in the chat. And right, I think of partnership, I think of microcosm, support systems, village, going back to that trust and that respect, loving accountability, right? That when we support each other, sometimes it means that we might have to have some tougher conversations, but we do it out of love and care. So I think just it's so important to reflect on this in terms of what's our vision, what's our goal, what's our hope, right? So always come back to that word and what that means to you and what you hope a community, right? What you strive for your community to embody and value in your mission, in your vision for the school. And so in thinking about your community, right, a big part of your community is obviously the children are a huge part at the center here. But your faculty and your families are as leaders, those are the ones that we are holding, right? So I have this concentric circles here to say, you know, the children are at the center and the parents and the teachers are the ones who are going to be with them the most, right? And then we're here kind of on the outside and we're sort of the holding, you know, the airplane metaphor, the parent puts the oxygen mask on their child. We as the leaders are helping put the oxygen masks on the parents and the teachers. So that's how I see our roles as leaders, is how do we help hold and support the adults who are the ones that work directly with the children, right? So that's where this layer. And we as a school administrators, we may be supporting the teachers and the parents. And I think of the neighbors and relatives that who are also probably those folks that might support the parents and the teachers as well, right? So who are their sort of networks helping to care for them? Because so much of cultivating community is about caring and offering that support and that care, that oxygen mask. So I very much strongly believe and encourage that you see that lens as your role as a school administrator is to make sure that both faculty and families are being equally valued and cared for, and those relationships are cultivated. because they are strong, strong constituents of your community. So we're going to kind of break down both faculty and families. They actually look similar, but different, right? So when thinking about faculty and attraction and retention, competitive salary and benefits is often, one of the first things before they even apply for a job at your school is they usually want to know, how much are you going to pay? What are the benefits, right? That's just something that you can't pretend they're not going to care about. It's the reality. And again, getting those prospective teachers to even look at what you have to offer, right? So making sure that you are inviting them into your school. So maybe you might do a professional development event to just get some curious teachers into your building. And you can offer, if you feel like we have a beautiful garden. We do really great, farm to table program here. So invite others in to say, this is how we started it. This is how we can do it, right? So think about what your school has to offer to share with other teachers and community members. So that way, then if they might be interested in coming to work at your school, you've got a way to sort of show them what your school values. What are some things you can offer them? And I'll come back to this competitive salary benefits for a second too, because what I'm going to say on a later slide with families is, right, they look at the other side of what's the cost, what's the tuition. But I think it's important to recognize, again, if we're going to hold and care for both of those perspectives, that to say, hey, families, yes, the reason why our tuition is the way it is so that we can have really great, wonderful, strong teachers who get paid a good salary, who we invest in their professional development, right? We send them to teacher programs and trainings. So you have to know why, when you're asking for parents, if you're kind of in a competitive tuition range, that there's a real strong understanding of why that you feel like this is the right price point for asking parents to pay that, so that your teachers also are valued and seen as we're putting our money where our mouth is, right? So that we put back into our teachers too. So I think making sure that that's all connected and linked is really important for both groups. So again, and then marketing, right? You can social media through LinkedIn, Insta, Facebook, website, whatever platforms that your school might be on is where you should be promoting jobs that might be coming up. So that way, again, you're attracting people to even just come check out what your positions are, what your schools might have to offer. Now the retention. So hopefully you've got some good teachers who are starting with you. And then that onboarding new teachers is so important. I can't overstress enough how, and I think we've probably all been there, right? Way back in my 20 years ago, when I think about when I first started, probably deer in headlights, like, oh my God, where do I even get a box of tissue around here, right? And so just that orienting, that letting teachers know some of those really basic things when they start. Where's the bathroom, right? Where do they park that first day? So just really having a strong orientation program, so that your teachers right from the bat have sort of their basic needs met, clear expectations of what is the job, what isn't the job, right? Being really upfront with all of these things so that they know what to expect, because nobody likes surprises as they go along. So as much as you can. And we also know there's things that just come along the way, but for the most part, as much as you can orient them in the beginning, a full day orientation or 2 days orientation before all the other staff come. It's so important to help them get their bearings before just kind of throwing them in there. If there is a possibility for them to even observe before they start, I think getting that pulse check on what other classrooms, what that culture looks like. Sometimes it depends if you're a year-round school or not. If you are a year-round school, it might be easier, but sometimes I know schools are hiring in the summers and classes aren't functioning in the same way in the summer. So it might not be possible, but if it is, I highly recommend. It's a great way for, again, both for you to help make sure that you're letting the teacher know this is our culture, this is our school, this is what to expect, and for them to say, do I want in or out? Because you don't want someone to come starting half in, half out, and then leave at midpoint, right? So, because that's no good for anyone. So you want this to be an opportunity for teachers to make the best decision for them too, so that again, they have choices and you do too. So in that process that you're preparing them for what, hopefully making the choice if this is the right fit for them. Mentorship. If your school doesn't already have a mentorship, I highly recommend creating just something as simple as, a more seasoned teacher who can again, sometimes those very experienced teachers that are kind of 20 plus years there, they might have forgotten what it's like to be a first year teacher. Your best mentors are actually those like 5 to 10 year teachers who got their bearings. They know they're in a good rhythm, they're in a good groove, and they haven't forgotten what it's like to be a new teacher too. So those are actually your best mentors. If they're able and willing, because I think they're usually more willing because they sometimes wish that they had that if they hadn't, right? Your 20 plus years teachers could be really great too, might be really great. They might also be in a place of, this, I'm in a groove, that might be too much, I don't know. So it's just something to think about. If your school does not already have a mentorship program, and you're interested in more about it, reach out to me and I'm happy to help, because there's a whole way to implement a mentorship program where there's different touch points throughout the year. What does that look like? How, what are questions that you can prep them for? What are things that we can do? So if that is something you'd like to touch base on, let me know. And that's sort of part of the mentorship is the frequent touch points, not just by the mentor, but obviously by the school leadership too. So are you offering, right? There's orientation at the beginning of the year, and then sometimes you don't gather those new teachers again at any point. Are there other points in the year, like in-service days or whatnot, that you say, hey, new teachers, let's just check in and you guys, let's chat about how things are going. Let me get your feedback, right? So as leaders, creating space to make sure, again, that what I started with earlier, that culture climate survey, like do that with your new teachers at different points in the year. Even those 2-year teachers, those 3-year teachers, having opportunities to make sure that you're just checking in on how their progress and their development and how they're feeling in terms of support. Because again, when I say it's all about the relationships, those are huge deposits that you're making when you do those formal, like you're really intentionally wanting to check in, not just on the fly, right? Which are great too. I'm not, the hallway check-in is always good. And you need to have the very intentional, let's sit down and carve out 30 minutes to check in with everyone together. So doing that. And now you've got the whole community, right, of teachers and faculty and staff that you want to make sure you are supporting. So again, I have stressed it a lot, the cultivating the relationships with everybody, with your custodial staff, right? Like I remember when I was at this school for 18 years total, right? Like, oh, so-and-so, they had a grandchild. How's your grandchild doing, right? Like you want to make sure everyone from your custodial to your receptionist to whoever, that you're building those relationships with every person in that school, because a good leader really values everybody who walks in that door. So as much as you can, and I know it might sound exhausting, I will also say delegating some of that too, right? So if you are the head of school and you have an associate head, like making sure that they're helping to cultivate these relationships and that they're keeping you up to date, right? So I remember my head would always say, like if somebody, so-and-so, this teacher, her mother's sick. She wanted to know that, right? Like she might not always get that information right away, but she would absolutely, when I'd say, hey, just so you know, Juana down the hall, like her mom's in the hospital. She's like, oh my God, thank you so much for telling me. I'll be sure to check in on her, right? What does she need? Do we need to get meals going, right? Something like that. So, so use your other people to help you depending on the size of your school, because that's important, right? To lean into your other leadership team who might be meeting more frequently with your teachers to then share, to let them know, I want to know this stuff. So please tell me if there is anything that would be helpful, especially like those big events kind of thing. When I think I mentioned informal events. So you could do quarterly. I put in there in parentheses, some schools are okay with serving alcohol at the end of the day for happy hour. Some might not, that's okay. But it could be end of day, you offer cookies, connection, communication. So a little treat, a little coming together, or cocktails if that might be okay to do. But usually first thing in the morning, I would say, no, not good, because they've got to get to class and that's never going to work. Lunch, I would also not, here and there, it's okay. I think if you're going to do something quarterly, every now and then, like maybe one lunch is fine. But again, sometimes lunch is like, I just need to disconnect, right? As teachers, they need that quiet time, or they need to get to those emails so they're not taking work home every evening or whatever. So after school, if it's possible to capture just 30, 40 minutes of just come join us for a little connection, especially post-pandemic. Everybody's happy to hopefully, have these opportunities to just have these informal connections. These little informal events, they don't have to be super long, but again, they're just a good pulse check to see how everyone's doing. And if there's any salient announcements, it's always, sometimes we're inundated with emails with our weekly updates kind of thing, that some things might get missed. But if there is something really critical or important, like these are great times to just say, hey, we're getting a new HR director soon. I just want you to all be aware, or something, right? Whatever it might be. So it's helpful to just certain salient pieces of communication to do at those times too are great. And again, I think I mentioned this, but making sure that everybody is seen as a valued member. So whose voices are at the table? If it's just faculty having meetings monthly, which I get, but where is then the opportunity for assistant teachers to come together and have meetings? Is that happening? Because if that's not being carved out for them, right, they kind of feel like, hey, do we not have a voice here, right? Do we not matter? So how are we making sure that all faculty and staff have a voice? So even those that might not be in the classroom, where might they be able to gather or share or have an opportunity to check in with you? So just making sure, again, that thinking about your whole faculty and staff community, are there opportunities for everyone to have their voices heard in some format or another? And again, it might not be just with you as head of school. It could be, again, your associate or your levels director, but then so if they're holding those meetings with your assistant teachers, or they're holding those meetings with other members of the faculty staff, that they are keeping you abreast of what's sort of coming out of those meetings, because it's impossible to be at all of them. But that's where you, again, have a good team that you trust and that you delegate to do this work and share this work with you. Again, really setting the culture and tone of, it's so important, right? We can have that one faculty member that could be toxic and say things that could be a little passive aggressive or hurtful, or just always the naysayer. That needs to be addressed. We all are great Montessorians, and we don't want to shame anyone in public about anything if they say something, but they do need to be, it can't go unchecked. So if I remember having levels meetings with my 3 to 6 teachers, and there was a teacher who would sometimes be a little bit unkind to another specific teacher, they just had very different opinions and styles, and it was a little bit bullying, right? And in this very sort of passive aggressive way. And I had to hey, all right, at the end of the meeting, say, hey, can you stay back for just a second? And I just said, hey, when you say it this way or like this, how do you think that might make her feel? Like it sounds, I just want to understand what you were thinking when your goal or your hope was, and if you really think you achieved that, right? And often, right, if I can help them even come to the realization of ooh, I probably should have or could have said that differently. I may have disagreed with them, but that wasn't the safest way to disagree, right? So you're not just shaming them of hey, don't do that, but it's the same thing that we do with children, teaching them, how could we do that better next time, right? what would be another way to get your goal across without doing more harm, right? Let's not cause more hurt and harm here in this process. And I would actually charge them with, you need to go also repair that with that teacher. Like, I'm not going to get in the middle of this, but I've noticed something as your supervisor, as your boss, that might not have felt great for so-and-so. What are you guys going to do to now repair that? And so making sure that if there is those little moments that they're learning from them, and that they have the opportunity to try to fix them, so that we're not festering this sort of toxic culture, right? Which could happen. If it keeps happening, that's something to, I would say, start bringing, if you have HR, right? Like, okay, this keeps happening. Like, what do we need to do to help this person grow? And if they're not growing and they're not changing and they're not, right, like, that's the performance issue, right? We have to be able to make sure everybody feels safe, and that everyone's voices and values or differences in opinion are valued, and you can do so in a safe way. So hopefully that can be cultivated. And for those that are not willing to do that, I think it's there. You don't want to keep those toxic people on ship, because they're just going to do that. They're going to make other people not feel safe to speak up, right? Okay, so I talked about that. I think I mentioned this earlier too, right? Your tuition cost. We had said that if your family's coming in and you say this is what the cost is, I think you have to also be able to point back. We use this to support you, making sure like the teachers have all the resources they need, making sure that they have the professional development, the training, right? So how are we supporting our teachers to learn and grow? It makes the teachers feel valued that you're investing them in this way. And again, hopefully you can use, again, if you have a tuition point that might be a little competitive, that you can say, yeah, it's because we really invest back into our teachers. And I think, as we all know, good educators, good teachers, we're lifelong learners, right? So that should be a value of your community, that teachers are expected to continue to do professional development. This idea of balancing autonomy and standardization, again, we all love our autonomy. So allowing that for when and where teachers can, because that feels good, right? We all like to have the way that we run our classroom or the gathering or certain things. So where and when they can have that autonomy, that's great. And there does need to be some standardization, so that again, if like parent teacher conferences or reports or those kind of things need to be shared out, that there is some consistency there, and you're holding that expectation, so that there's not this disconnect. Because what can happen is Susie's class down the hall, she sends pictures every day to families, but Mary's class down the hall that way, she only sends pictures once a month. And parents with kids in two classes will be like, gosh, maybe Mary doesn't like doing much in my class. So what are some of those standards that you're setting to, again, because that can lead to sometimes you don't intend, nobody intends to create this conflict, but unintentionally, by not having certain standards around how many pictures are we sending, what's enough, what's too much, what's too little, but do we all agree that the number of pictures, it'll be X by the end of this week or something, so that way you don't got parents like wondering why things look so different from one class to the other. Again, really prioritizing days like in-service days for that professional development, for prep time, making sure that they have prep time built in during their days or weeks, because again, we know that it's more than just coming in and teaching lessons, right? That there's so much, the emails, the lesson planning, the recording, all the things, so that we again are showing them that we care and we value for them by making sure that we have these things in place, making sure that they get breaks. I remember that was always such a big one. Even if you're short staffed, like I would jump in all the time just to say, go take your at least 30 minutes or whatever you need to just have to reset, right? Because I think teachers especially need to make sure that they get that at some point in their day. And then just appreciation for them, right? I know a lot of schools might just do staff appreciation week and get them like lunch or treats or something. But making sure that it's not just this one week, right? That there's other ways that they feel appreciated. So coffees, like, right, is the coffee station, hopefully the tea coffee station, that it's always robust and it's there. I've been to schools where it's just always empty and sad looking and they don't feel cared for. And so if somebody is paying attention and that's important, that's a value to make sure, we want to make sure our tea and coffee station always feels full. It's a small little thing, but it shows that you appreciate them, right? So just thinking about those little things. And sorry, I want to be mindful of our time because I see that we're already, it's 1:00 and I'm like not even halfway through. Okay, I'm gonna like speed it up. Sorry, Camila.
No worries.
Okay. This is something I can't take credit for. It's the National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector. For those that aren't familiar with that training, I was at a private school for many years and I took this training and I highly still recommend it. Again, I'm not getting any kickbacks from anyone, just really sharing good knowledge wherever it is, good resources out there. This is a training that is in DC area, but I think you can do them online now. Ever since COVID, everything's online. And this was something that I got from that training that I thought was interesting to hold as leaders. That, right, like the fundamental needs of Montessori teachers and just those material things and the spiritual things. I won't read through all of it, but I think it's an important reminder of how we try to help care for our teachers, right? All the things that we need to help them to be their best selves. Camila, are we sharing slides? I'm happy to.
Yeah, that would be great, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. For anyone who's registered, I don't mind sharing them out. I don't want to share them without context, but with context, I'm happy to share it if that's okay. So I'll share this slide so you guys can take a deeper look at it. Okay, so now families. A lot of things that I put in here are similar, but yet, of course, we have to look at it from the lens of how do we support our families. So again, attracting our families, whether you're public, private, there's going to be different things that families look at, right? What are the resources your school has? Is it a lottery? What's the whole, even just admission process, the cost, the location, windows and mirrors, I think is an important one if you're in a diverse area or not, right? Families who might feel like, I want to make sure my child has representation here. If they're a child of color, if they're a child who's coming from an LGBTQ plus family, right? Like that they have others that look or have similar experiences as they do. So that's important. So if you do already are thinking, gosh, we have a couple families that might be the only, how do you work to attract more families so that they're not the only, right? So I think that's important to think about in your marketing as well too, and if you're target marketing too. So again, and as looking for prospective parents, right? You can also, the same way I suggested a teacher event talk, to do a parent event talk. So something around child development. Again, your Montessori teachers know what they're doing, right? And so would there be somebody who you can uplift and say, hey, you are so great at presenting on language. Would you like to do a brief thing for the wider parent community, our parent community, and let's open it up to other parents. Tell a parent to bring a friend, right? So you could even do a parent event that's bring a friend event, bring a friend to your parent event, because I will say, and I think I put this here too, is that your word of mouth, your current families are often your best promoters of your school. And if they come to your parent events and they were like, gosh, this parent ed talk was so great, I wish my neighbor could hear it. Great, bring your neighbor next time, right? So making those moments are great moments to try to sell your school as well. Oh, and panelists. So at your parent event, sometimes great panelists speakers are not just your teachers, but also current parents. Again, they can speak sort of, if you're doing like a coffee tour or something, they can speak about their experience as parents and your older students. If you have a school that goes up to 8th grade, we used to have our 7th and 8th graders, even our 5th and 6th graders, put a little presentation together about why did they like going to this school? What are some of the highlights about this school? What does Montessori look like at 9 to 12, right? So that hopefully you're also having parents not just look at the 3 to 6, but oh gosh, this is what it could look like for my child long-term here. And similarly, onboarding new families, it's so important that they also are well-oriented, right? That they also have a mentor. So if, again, you don't have this, that new families are paired with a returning family, that's something for sure that, right, those little questions like, what are good house shoes to buy? Or like, what's a good lunchbox? Or gosh, what is this event coming up in the classroom? Because I should know what a harvest breakfast is or something. Or they do, so again, all those little things that sometimes they feel afraid to ask the teacher about or don't want to bug anyone, their parent mentor should be their go-to. And again, I can share ideas if you don't already have a parent mentorship program of how you can establish one in your school, because there's a lot of great opportunities. Again, certain checkpoints in the school I used to work at, our admissions director would help sort of keep that one organized for new families coming in and kind of pair them up together and do the ask of current families. And all current families, again, loved having it when they came in. So they're happy. Usually we don't ever have a problem finding parents that want to mentor new families, because they always appreciate when someone did it for them. Or if you're establishing it for the first time, I'm sure they would say, gosh, I wish I had that. And I'm happy to help. Okay. Yeah. And then also part of your onboarding them too is, right, giving them many opportunities to learn about your school and learn about Montessori, and offering parent eds, different open houses, the open houses. Hopefully we're starting to get back into those. I know COVID might have put a lot of those on hold, but if you are able to do those again, I think they're just great ways for your families to build that connection, build that community, right? And the pictures or blog posts are great ways, again, to keep that pulse check going, making sure that communication is so huge for families. And that right balance of it too, right? Too much communication, they start checking out. But just the right amount, just, the salient pieces of information. They love pictures. Who doesn't love pictures of their kids? But those kind of opportunities to just, again, build that connection, let them know we're happy to show you, snapshots of what's happening here. And again, as I keep saying, I'm sure you're going to be so sick of me saying it, but those relationships. so, getting to know those families. I really can't say enough about being at those events, right? Being just being at the door in the mornings, being around to just especially getting to know your new families. Hopefully the longer they stay, the more you'll get to know them. But when they come in, just establishing those relationships. Do you live in the neighborhood? Oh, how'd you hear about us? We're so happy to have you, right? Oh gosh, so-and-so, they were your neighbor. They were a great family here, right? Whatever it might be. So making those connections. And again, parent involvement, it's such a great way to build community. I keep saying, you don't have to, as a leader, do all of this yourself. This is where you can help delegate. So hopefully you have a parent association or a family association where they can help with the onboarding of new families, or they can help with some of these events. They can help put together the fall fest or whatever it is, so that you're not always creating all these events, but they're helping to create these events for connection. You can show up, but you don't have to organize it all. So lean into your families that want to help. Again, room parents, having parent committees, parent representatives. Hopefully they can be a part of your fundraising team, be a part of your just different parts, your admissions in some way, right? They help do tours as well. So you can cultivate that from your community. And I think, again, their voice then is being added to the mix too, right? If they get to be part of your admissions tours, that their voice gets to be heard, that's huge, right? That they feel like, oh gosh, we matter here. We're an important person in this community, or our families' voices matter here. And similarly, right, offering those opportunities for connection. Here I did put coffees, because I think it's okay to do some morning ones for your parents as well. And maybe balancing it. Maybe if you're doing it quarterly, that you have 2 coffees a year and 2 cocktails or cookies a year, so that it's for families that might not be able to come in the mornings, that they have that option to come later in the day, or vice versa, right? And again, that expectation really clearly from the beginning of what is our parent school partnership. There shouldn't be surprises around you've signed up for Montessori school. We're going to deliver Montessori, and we're going to give you opportunities to learn what Montessori is. So that's where the parent ed around philosophy, right? We might be a school that has to fundraise. And so that shouldn't be a surprise that fundraising is a part of our school. So you, as part of good communication, a strong community also says this is a value of ours here, so that we can, again, meet the needs of our school. We can have the resources, we can send our teachers for professional development. So being fully transparent. Volunteerism, that you can say, we have these parent groups and parent associations, and it's so important that our families step up and volunteer. So I think being really clear from the onset is so important, so that there's no surprises either. Okay, and then I'm almost done, but I thought this was kind of funny because I tried to, the fundamental needs of teachers that you saw that I got from the National Montessori Public Sector, I tried to look for like, is there a fundamental need for parents? And I couldn't really find anything. I was trying to research. And so I kind of pulled, right? So we know Dr. Montessori, the fundamental needs came from the elementary curriculum, the fundamental needs of humans, which a lot of it, obviously, I'm not expecting you to be able to see this, but it's, it parallels a lot of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so the physiological, safety, love, belonging, esteem. I found this too, which I thought was interesting. It was from a center in England. I put it up here, of just different thinking about parents. And so I think this might be even like, do parents have some of the basic skills to support their children's learning? So are they literate? Do they have numeracy, right? Physically, are they able to, or do we need to help them with a certain advocacy? So I think it depends on your parent body, right? What different needs are, here, you know what, I'm just going to go to the next one, because what I tried to do is look at that and try to create something that I was trying to put together as my own vision of what parents' fundamental needs were. Clearly, it's still a work in progress. I was just kind of like playing around with, all right, since nothing exists out there, at least not that I could find, I tried to put them together. If anybody on this call is like, oh, there is something that exists, please share it with me, because I couldn't find something, and I would love to see if there is something that exists. But it was this idea, right? Taking like, what are the basic material human needs around just food, clothing, shelter, spiritual needs, wanting to feel loved, belonged, but as parents, right, what do parents sometimes need is like, we have to think about their histories, right? Some of those patterns, those behaviors that they might not know differently, right? They don't have the same knowledge of child development, or they don't have the same skill set that we as trained Montessorians, we would know, you know, child development and what are good ways to support their behaviors. So you have to remember that your parents are not all coming, right, from the same, they're all going to come from different backgrounds, different experiences. Their relationships as parents, their relationships to the school, to their teachers, to other people living in their house, to their spouse, to the grandparents, other caregivers, right? And even parents as like those who have more access to resources, those that don't. So those that might be able to have access to tutors or extracurricular, whatever, versus those that might not. So every parent might be coming in with different, again, just when we think of the care that we want to offer, just remember that we have to think about where parents might be coming in as parents. I think this is a big one too, their parental attachment, right? Do they have a secure attachment with their child, or an insecure attachment? That a lot of that trust and that independence that we know is so great for children, parents might not always know the best way to do that. So how do we support them? All right, so wrapping up just really quick, I want to leave a little time for Q&A, but just some salient, hopefully, highlights from the talk today of just our role as leaders and community cultivators, and that it's not a solo job. I hope you do think about the team that you have on your leadership team with you, and how they help support you in all of these frameworks. And again, the child is at the center, but we are helping put the oxygen mask on for those parents and for the faculty and staff. And really being able to listen, to support, and try to empower our faculties and families so they can be their best selves. Because that's truly what I believe as good leaders, is that we're always trying to lift others up. So how do we make sure that we are constantly trying to think, how can I help? How can I help them to help themselves, right? The same way we say for the children in Montessori, we want to help the children to help themselves. We as the leaders want to help the parents and the teachers, how do we help them to help themselves to be the best at what they can do as well? All right. And so I'm just going to leave it now open for questions, comments, any ideas. I don't claim to be the only one on this call that has ideas. And so please, if you all as leaders feel like, oh, we did this event or thing that was such a success, this is a great opportunity to share that out. And if you want to reach out to me, I mentioned that I do consulting work. You might be able to even test it out on my phone. If you wanted to go right to my website, you can get the QR code and do that. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Reena. We already have a great question here in the chat. I'll read it
Please,
out.
yeah.
It's from Natasha, who's asking, I'm a new head of school and I have some team members that have trouble seeing me as such. How or what can I do to cultivate that respect and recognize my new leadership role aspect from some of my staff?
Yeah, such a great question. And I would say the relationship, building that trust is huge. And so much, if this is your first year as a head, just listen and learn. Don't try to make any changes because you're coming in to whatever culture climate is currently there to listen, learn, take in. Definitely take notes. If you're like, that's interesting that they do it that way. I wonder why. You can wonder, you can ask. I think it's important to seek to understand. That's your role right now. Seek to understand. So asking questions, definitely cultivating the trust in the relationships by, because whatever your team has built and established before you got there, they probably feel maybe possessive about it, right? This is how we've always done it. This is my thing that I've worked so hard at. And if you might be thinking to yourself, why do you do it that way? In a very non-judgmental, non-shaming way, hey, can you tell me more about that? I'd love to learn and understand the why behind this. You can do the wondering together. I wonder if right? But you can only get to those kind of wondering or suggesting or making whatever once there's more trust established, because without any trust, they're not going to want to listen. Sorry, I hate to say it that way, but really, right, in any relationship, there has to be some trust built first. And so the way you build trust is to just first see what they do, learn about why they do it, try to, again, seek to understand. And then you slowly start, once you can tell you're building, you're earning their trust, to then try to help them see another way. If that might be something that you're trying to do. I definitely would even say, just getting to know them on a personal level. Spend your one-on-one meetings with your team to just say, tell me your story. Tell me how you came to be here. Tell me about your family. I'd love to hear. I will just say, people usually like to talk about those things, right? Some people are more private and don't want to, and that's okay. But they may have something that, like, even if they are a dog lover, tell me about your dog, right? Something that just makes a connection beyond you're their boss and like they might feel nervous or intimidated, or you're coming in here to change all these things, right? But something that shows a human connection is so important. I hope that's helpful.
And Trisha in the comments also adds, support them in any way possible to be there for them. So yeah, and then Natasha also wanted to follow up with, I was a teacher before taking over.
Oh, great. So has the relationships. And so that's actually tricky too, though, because now you're the boss of people that used to be your peers. So that can be a little tricky. And I think, again, where you can elevate those teachers too, right? Like, hey, like, I know and you don't have to say it this way, but like, as peers, this so-and-so is great at how they did certain language, whatever. But now as their supervisor, how do you help them see and value their strengths, right? So, hey, I know you do this really great language lessons. Would you like to present that at a faculty meeting, or would you like to present at this conference? I think you really, right? So it's just showing them that you value what they have to offer too. But now as their superior, like, you can give them these like opportunities to actually, where you have more control over them being able to elevate, to try to do that where you can.
We have another question here in the chat from Wally. If we have an elementary teacher who is a good teacher and parents love her, but she is not a team player and does not work well with other staff members, if you suggest improvement, most probably she will quit. That would potentially end our elementary program. How could you deal with such a situation?
Oh, that is so tough. I know, because they're usually right. Like if their parents and children love them, that's so wonderful and great. But if there's something toxic happening among the faculty, I would definitely encourage like more one-on-one check-ins with that person to try to understand what is it that might not be working for her and the team, right? So really just to seek to understand like why is this person not a team player? Like what is it underlying that's making her frustrated with her peers or frustrated with her? Oftentimes it's, well, I feel like I'm doing the brunt of whatever, or I feel like da da da. Like so try to really get at again more check-ins to just understand, and just the same way we do as Montessorians in the classroom, we state observations, right? We're not putting judgment on it, but you can just state the observation. I observed in the levels meeting when so and so said this, you kind of crossed your arms and shut down or whatever it might be. I don't know. But can you tell me more about that? What's going on? Right. So again, seek to understand yourself so that you can help support and help them grow. Because that a big part, I think they have to be willing to be coached and mentored. And if they are someone that I'm hearing you say, if you give that feedback, they might shut down and quit. But how do you do it in a safe and supportive way so that they don't put up more walls and barriers, but that they actually, and I think you can say, gosh, you say all the great things that you value about them. I really value you here at this school. I value your relationship with the parents. I value your relationship with the students. You are so excellent in the classroom. And I want to make sure that your peers see how much value you have too. But I'm noticing that there's sometimes some conflict among your peers. So how can I help you to be your best self in the whole community here too, right? So that again, you're working to support them and coach them in that way. And they have to be willing to be coached in that way too. Because I agree, if they just aren't and they shut down, we're all, again, we're here, nobody's perfect. And so hopefully they'd be open and willing to learn and grow as well. So in a way that feels safe is important to help them say, this is our value as educators, is that we're always willing to be open to learning and growing and feedback. And I want to do this because I want to support you to be the best teacher you can be here.
Certainly. Wally says it's a little bit tough as she's been teaching for 20 years. So that's a challenge.
Yeah. And I know those teachers. And sometimes I think it's change, right? Like over the years, especially if technology, and they have to now do all their record keeping in transparent classroom, because that's what all the younger teachers can do it so much quicker and faster. Some of it's just like bitterness around like, I used to do my record keeping this way and I don't want to change and have to do it that way. That's real, because 20 plus year teachers, things have changed in the way we might be doing some things, and they have to, again, that's that standardization thing or whatnot, or that they might just be judgmental of how the newer teachers might be doing something. I think acknowledging it, just acknowledge, making sure that they feel seen and heard in that way of, I know that there's been a lot of change. I acknowledge that. And how can I help you get comfortable with some of the things that we do have to change, right? How can I support you with, if it's technology or with X or Y or Z? But acknowledging it is helps them to feel seen and heard too. Yeah, those are tricky. I'm not gonna lie.
Great advice there, Reena. Are there any other questions, comments before we wrap up? We covered a lot of great advice throughout this presentation. So thank you, Reena.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I appreciate all of you again being here, and feel free again to reach out, because I know I like that somebody did say, yes, maybe ready to retire. That I'm just like looking at the comments right now. For sure. like if, again, when I say that there's that constant resistance, that constant, well, I don't need that, I don't, whatever, that is where I say, if you have an HR person, like you might need to have a conversation of, is it time to see if this person needs to, with dignity, be coached out. I will say with dignity, because it's important, those lifelong teachers, especially, to not create, like you said, you could lose the whole elementary program if they choose to go. But if you also see, like, teachers have been through so much after the last few years because of COVID, and those 20-year plus teachers, they really might be tired and whatever. I honestly, I know this is a big out of the box thinking, but like, is there even any room for like a sabbatical for a few weeks, right? Like, could they, as this very seasoned teacher, spend a little time reading and researching and doing something to take a little break or mind space? It's, again, out of the box thinking, but I think we need to start thinking about those things, especially when burnout and teacher retirement is becoming so prevalent. And if we want to retain them, how do we start building in opportunities to help them recharge their batteries, or help them not feel so burnt out? So maybe there's parents that are willing to put into a sabbatical fund and give that opportunity to those really seasoned teachers who we don't want to lose, but to give them that space to recharge, or sort of give back their energies in different ways that might be a necessary shift for them.
All right, well, we're just wrapping up on the hour here, so I don't want to keep everyone on, because I know it's a busy day, a busy time of year for everyone. But if you have any follow-up questions for Reena, feel free to reach out to her. Her email and her website are up on the screen, so feel free to take a note of that and reach out to Reena. Thank you so much, Reena, for your presentation. We'll be back next week, where we will be hosting an open forum on creating a positive workplace culture in your Montessori schools. So if that's something you're interested in discussing and touching base with other school leaders about, please join us at the same time next week. It's always free to join our town halls. You can also watch the recording of today's meeting in our YouTube channel or on our Montessori Thrive website as well, if you're a member. So you can reference it. You can find Reena's information there as well. It'll be under the YouTube video, so if you want to reach out to her. Also, I'm going to drop my email in the chat. If you have any questions about our town halls, if there's a topic you want to see, if there's someone that you would like to see come and present, or if you yourself would like to come and present a topic, you can reach out to me. And I'll see if we have room for it in our calendar, or if I can get it organized. So please just let me know. All right. Thank you to Reena, and thank you for everyone who joined us. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.